So more than 227 members of the 290-member parliament in Iran are calling for the Judiciary Committee to issue the death penalty to anti-government protesters. That's more than 14,000 people who are currently being wrongfully detained are facing execution. The majority of which are most likely under the age of 25, mind you. So keep in mind that the IRI, the Islamic Republic of Iran, views any person that speaks out against its system of rule, this totalitarian, despotic, autocratic, vicious, dictatorial system, as an enemy of God. Anybody who speaks out against this government is an enemy of God. It's actually called enmity against God. If you're anti-government, you are anti-God. So, if you're actively protesting for your basic human freedoms, women's rights, which are half that of a man, okay, the right to bodily autonomy or religious autonomy, calling out the dysfunction of the government systems that have mismanaged ecological systems, caused severe economic distress due to corruption, the thievery of financial gains through exploitation of the country's resources, which should belong to the people and used to stabilize the economy, are rather used to fund proxy wars and terrorism abroad in that region. If you speak up against any of these things that I've mentioned, then you're anti-government and you are waging a war on God and corruption on earth. Oh yeah, that one too. These are actual charges that are punishable by death. Waging war on God, corruption on earth. That's the current conversation in Iran's parliament. 227 adults discussing how to mass execute the public. Genocide. A system of government that calls women and girls whores for ripping off the compulsory hijab and dancing in the streets, which is illegal, by the way. And then in turn responding to them by kidnapping them and raping them, because if they dance and show hair, they must be whores, and so it justifies rape. And keep in mind that as I record this, hundreds of young girls and women in the detention centers and prisons all over Iran are desperately pleading for family members to bring them abortion pills. Let that sink in. Free Tumanj Salehi, free Salman Yassin, free Mohammad Qobadlu, and the thousands of other political prisoners who have wrongly been convicted.
Thank you for all your support. To those of you who've been sharing information about Iran on social media, educating others on the issues, and helping to amplify the voices of the Iranian people, we truly, truly appreciate it, and we will not forget. But unfortunately, the situation in Iran has just gotten even worse, and we really need your help now more than ever. During the last couple of months of this Iranian revolution, close to 15,000 citizens have been arrested by their government, and many of these people arrested are women, some as young as 3 years old, believe it or not. And they've been arrested simply for the act of protesting. Now, mind you, these were all very peaceful protests. The only crimes that these citizens have committed is that of standing against their ruthless regime that runs the country. But the Iranian parliament has now announced that they plan to execute everyone that's been arrested, without trial, without due process, without defense attorneys, without any evidence. We need now more than ever the help of the international community to help us get this message across and to get this information out to the world. Now, since this video is mainly for my non-Iranians, I wanted to take a minute and answer a couple of questions that I've gotten from people, and my hope is that this will increase understanding of the situation and make non-Iranians more comfortable just sharing this information on their social media platforms. First of all, I know some people have expressed concern about sharing posts because they're afraid to come off as anti-Islamic or Islamophobic. And let me just tell you that that is not something you need to be concerned about. There is absolutely nothing anti-Islamic about supporting the women of Iran and the rest of its citizens. The Iranian people are not fighting against Islam itself. They are fighting against the Islamic Republic, their government. And that's a government that for the last 43 years has used the religion of Islam as an excuse to terrorize, torture, rape, and kill their own people. This revolution is not simply about the women of Iran not wanting to wear a hijab or a headscarf. That is just a very small aspect of it. The women and the people of Iran do not want a government that is run by religion. They want a secular democracy. They want people to be free to practice Islam and free to not practice if they choose to. This revolution is not against Islam. They want freedom of religion. The women of Iran want autonomy over their own bodies. They're not fighting against Islam. They're fighting against their government. And Iran is not just an Islamic country. There are many different religious practices there. There are Iranians who are Jewish, Iranians who are Christian, Baha'i, and Zoroastrians. They want freedom of religion for everyone. Religion should be a choice, not a forced mandate. Another concern other people have expressed to me is that they fear coming off as performative if they're simply just posting about Iran on their social media. Again, let me tell you that this is not something you need to be concerned about. The Iranian people themselves are asking and begging the world to post about Iran on social media. Because of the lack of internet access in Iran, because the government has shut down the internet at this moment, it's pretty much the only way of getting information about the atrocities happening there to the rest of the world. Now, I know it seems like a small thing, just posting something on your social media, but it's huge for the Iranian people. Because whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, it's helping to continuously fuel the Iranian revolution. It's truly helping amplify the voices of people in Iran. And that is why I'm asking my non-Iranians to please help us by showing your support and solidarity and simply posting and sharing information on your social media platforms about what is happening to the women and the people in Iran. This is about human rights, autonomy over one's own body and destiny. This is about the rights of the LGBTQ in Iran, about the rights of ethnic minorities in Iran, about the rights of the Baha'i people who have suffered enormous violations of human rights against them by the Iranian government. This is about basic freedoms that all human beings around the world not only deserve, but we are entitled to. These are aspects of the human condition that all people all over the world are still fighting for in their own cultures. These are universal issues that we all face. We must all rise up. Rise up with the women of Iran. Rise up with the people of Iran. I leave you with this beautiful phrase that the people of Iran are chanting in the streets day and night. Zan, Zendegi, Azadi. Woman, life, freedom.
Sweeping Iran. Since anti-regime protests broke out nearly 2 months ago now, human rights activists say security forces have killed more than 300 people and arrested more than 14,000 others. Now, that includes about 24 actors and musicians. One of Iran's top actors who starred in the Oscar-winning movie The Salesman put this photo of herself without a headscarf on Instagram with a message of support for the protests. Now, this is very brave because this is a move that could potentially derail her acting career. Roxana Saberi shows us how artists in Iran are here in the U.S., and they're using their creativity to speak out in both countries. Roxana, good morning to you.
Good morning, Gail. Artists are painting and musicians are singing in support of the protests. But inside Iran, many celebrities, including athletes, authors, and composers, are getting punished for showing solidarity.
A song of defiance. For protesters in Iran, it has become their anthem, called Baraya, which means for the sake of. Shervin Hajipour based the lyrics on Iranians' tweets about why they're demonstrating. For the sake of dancing in the streets, the shame of poverty, for normal life, and for woman, life, freedom. viewed 40 million times in less than 48 hours, Baraya has become the most viral tune in Iran's history. Speaking on condition of anonymity, fearing retaliation from the regime, this college student from Tehran told me the lyrics made her cry.
Some are so personal, and that shows how much our personal life has been controlled. All these years, we didn't have any privacy. We didn't have the right to sing, to speak up, to wear what we want. Can you imagine that?
The song has resonated around the world. Performed by Coldplay with exiled Iranian actress Golshifteh Farahani, and at recent rallies in solidarity with Iran's protesters in Berlin and in LA, where Iranians like actor Tara Grami know all the words.
It resonated with every single one of us. Those reasons are also why there's so many Iranian immigrants in the diaspora, and they're all the reasons why we're standing up now.
Iran's Islamic regime has long censored music, art, and culture. Singer Hajipour was detained for days. And friends of dissident rapper Toomaj Salehi say he's being tortured in prison. Fueled by the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in the custody of Iran's morality police, women are casting off their mandatory headscarves and leading chants of woman, life, freedom. While anti-regime art is appearing on walls, in fountains dyed the color of blood, outside Iran, with more freedom to create, Iranian singers, actors, and artists like Roya Karbakhsh are amplifying the voices of those they left behind. With each stroke of her brush, Karbakhsh paints a story about women, life, and freedom. The 35-year-old says she didn't have the confidence to create like this in her native country of Iran.
Would you be able to show this in the Islamic Republic of Iran?
Oh, no, of course not. Because I'm showing the bodies and like a woman without any scarves.
Since moving to Chicago 5 years ago, she's portrayed womanhood as she wishes. Her latest work inspired by the women and girls now protesting in her homeland.
You deserve to have a freedom, and you are right to fight for that.
Baraya has been submitted for a Grammy Award in the new category Best Song for Social Change. The Recording Academy says it received tens of thousands of submissions for the song from members of the public. The Academy will announce its nominees next Tuesday. Nate?
Roxana Superior in London, thank you.
Yeah, it's another reminder to me, guys, of how much we take for granted in this country.
Right.
And I look at what's happening in that country, how people are dying and why they're dying. It's very heartbreaking and sobering. I'm glad people are speaking up, but look at the risks they're taking by doing that.
Yeah, the freedoms that we have, the people who defend them. I mean, 14,000 arrests and more than 300 killed by the government of Iran. That's a big number.
It also speaks to those who have influence and how they use their platform and their voice.
If you have been on a inbound flight to O'Hare from off of Lake Michigan over the last few days, you may have seen this display. If you happen to have a window seat and look down, a big message on the field just south of Montrose Harbor, written in thousands of flags. These run, there are 8 letters, they run about the length of a full-length soccer field. Each one of these flags representing, though, a heartbreaking reality for many Iranian citizens.
We just want everyone to know we want a free Iran.
Those 2 words, free Iran, written with 15,000 flags, each one representing an Iranian citizen wrongly detained or killed by the current regime.
There are students, activists, artists, athletes. They just have one message. They had one need. They want to fight for justice and their simple human rights that been taken away from them.
Latifi says Iranians are being imprisoned and in some cases killed for peacefully demonstrating in favor of free elections and due process, claims echoed by international human rights groups in the wake of the death of Mahsa Amini, who died in police custody after being arrested by what's known as the morality police for improperly wearing her hijab.
When Mahsa Amini was killed by the morality police, it just started a spark. And people started to be like, okay, that's it. Enough is enough.
Latifi and the hundreds of volunteers who spent 3 weeks setting up this demonstration want Chicagoans to know just how dire the situation in Iran is.
This is the first time in the world you see a revolution being led by women and men willing to die for them, to fight with them, to stand for their rights. And it's about everyone.
And all these flags, they went up on Sunday. If you want to check them out for yourself, very moving to see them up close in person. Very stunning. They just stretch for so long, farther than I can see. Right now, the Chicago Park District has given this group permission to keep these flags in place for 2 weeks. We are live tonight just south of Montrose Harbor. Anthony Ponce, Fox 32, Chicago.
Unfinished business of the 21st century is an issue we cover often on this program, and now it's the focus of a summit hosted by the former Secretary of State, Hillary Rodham Clinton, and Chelsea Clinton, her daughter and vice chair of the Clinton Foundation. Friday's event will bring together advocates, artists, political and policy leaders from around the world to address defending and advancing women's rights, they say. The agenda including voting rights, healthcare, peace, the workplace, and more. It is a fight that Hillary Clinton has led for decades, most famously with her call nearly 30 years ago at a UN Women's Conference in Beijing, and often quoted and repeated ever since.
If there is one message that echoes forth from this conference, let it be that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
And Hillary Clinton is joining me now for an exclusive interview from the Clinton Center in Little Rock, Arkansas. Welcome to our program. And, you know, that was such a rousing statement you made that I think took the world by surprise when you said it in Beijing. And I just wonder, when you hear it again and you see what's happening now to women around the world, what do you think, as you say, unfinished business?
Well, what I think, Christiane, is that we have come a long way since I made that statement back in 1995 on so many fronts. But we are also in a period of time where there is a lot of pushback, and much of the progress that has been, I think, taken for granted by too many people is under attack, literally under attack in places like Iran or Afghanistan or Ukraine, where rape is a tactic of war, or under attack by political and cultural forces in a country like our own when it comes to women's health care and bodily autonomy.
And we're going to go around the world with you in a second, but first about precisely what you're talking about and where you are. Arkansas itself, I believe, rapidly moved to make a woman's right to choose illegal in your state or your former home state, and you're hosting this conference. Talk to me about the confluence of both these events, this pushback on American women's rights, at the same time as you're trying to figure a way forward.
Well, you're absolutely right. We are here at the Clinton Presidential Center with an exhibit that is just astonishing, and the breadth and depth of its look at the history of the fight for the vote, to raise our voices, to claim our rights. And I think that's a conversation that should happen everywhere, not just with people who agree with you, but we have work to do to try to defend our rights, to stand up for them. And what we've seen, particularly since the Dobbs decision across our country, is that when voters, both men and women, but led by women, have a chance to vote on these draconian abortion restrictions, they do not accept them. They overturn them. They certainly want to limit the reach of the government into the most intimate, private parts of our life. So I'm thrilled to be back in Arkansas. It's a state that means a great deal to me. It's where I got married. It's where my daughter was born. I have so many friends, and the Clinton Presidential Center is a real source of bringing people together and talking about tough, difficult issues, because we have to continue talking and listening to each other. There will be, I hope, opportunities for us to really learn about how we can move forward instead of being pushed back. And so we'll be here at the summit tomorrow. The exhibit will be up into the late spring, but we're going to keep the conversation going here and everywhere we have a chance.
So let me ask you about that, because, you know, keep the conversation going, persuade everybody, etc. But I mean, how much persuasion can we expect when it comes to our, and I'm speaking as a woman, basic rights, whether it's in the United States or around the world? As you said, they are human rights. At what point should these be enshrined, even in the American law and Constitution even? I mean, I'm probably exaggerating, but it's extraordinary in 2022 that this basic right of women, half the world's population, is still at risk.
Well, you're right, and it's why the United States Congress just this week passed a federal law protecting the right of gay marriage, the right of interracial marriage, to try to enshrine at least a federal right to those fundamental human rights. And I think we have to have that conversation going because, as you could see with that vote, in the Senate, I think a dozen Republicans voted with all the Democrats. That would not have happened 10 years, 20 years ago, I know. So in a democracy, when things don't go your way, when you suffer setbacks, you need to remember that there is no permanent political victory or defeat. You have to keep fighting for these fundamental rights. You have to try to enshrine them in law as best you can, and in our system at both the federal and the state level. So we'll see what happens in states like Arkansas and so many others when we face real world problems, as we have seen already, where women with miscarriages go in for medical care and are turned away, when maybe, God forbid, a woman dies because that health care is denied her. I just believe that the fervor of the interests that are saying there should be absolutely no choice for women in half the states or more of our country will run right up against reality, as it has in elections in Kansas and Kentucky and Montana, California and Michigan, where voters got to vote on these extreme measures or trying to prevent them from ever being imposed in their states. And right now, it's obvious that, you know, the great majority of Americans believe the Supreme Court, local states, legislatures, et cetera, have gone way too far.
So you mentioned Ukraine, and of course you were Secretary of State. You dealt with these issues around the world. And we know, as you mentioned, that rape and other assault is being used as a weapon of war there. And the testimonies are truly, barbaric, as Western leaders have called them. We've had the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska, here in the UK to highlight precisely this at a special conference. I would like to play just a little bit and get you to react.
Ми знаємо, що наймолодшій дівчинці
We have documented thousands of crimes, including sexual violence. The youngest girl who was raped by the Russian occupiers was 4 years old. The oldest survivor was 85. These are the victims we know. How many victims we still don't know about.
And you know, Madam Secretary, that this is a story that we saw in Bosnia. We saw it, in many parts of war-torn Africa, in all over the world. We see this, and I'm wondering what can be done to stop this beyond accountability, if it ever gets to that, and hopefully it will. There must be something that the U.S. and the rest of the world can do to force education on people's militaries. Is there?
Oh, this is such an outraging and heartbreaking problem, Christiane, because, of course, there should be an absolute rejection of using sexual attack of any kind as a tactic of war. But sadly, we have seen it not just in the past, but in current times, from the Congo now to Ukraine. And I think we have to continue to hold the leaders accountable and continue to speak out about what this kind of barbaric treatment says about a military and about a leadership of a country that would at least permit, if not condone, such attacks. But the real challenge for us is to keep supporting the brave people of Ukraine, especially as they fight back and push back the Russian occupiers. The fewer Russian occupiers who are on their territory, the fewer women and girls who will be subjected to rape. And I hope that as we move into the winter, which we know will be especially brutal for the people of Ukraine, that we don't lose our commitment or our absolute passion to help them with every tool that they need, with military means, with humanitarian aid. And I also think it's time for the United States and NATO to take another look at providing more defensive weapons, because what the Russians are doing is trying to literally bomb the Ukrainian people into submission by destroying their power generators, their electricity grid. They will not succeed, but the suffering will increase. So anything that can be done to give the Ukrainian military more means of rebuffing these brutal bombing attacks, we need to be looking much more closely at doing that. We need to be looking much more closely at doing that.
So you think, and you would support the United States giving more sophisticated, anti-missile defense systems, and also the U.S. has called several times. I've spoken to senators on both sides that their big ally Israel should do the same thing with the Iron Dome that the U.S. provides, etc. What would you say to your own country and to allies in this regard, and others in Europe as well?
I would say exactly what you said. It is time to give much more sophisticated defense measures. And I know there's a new government in Israel, and they are rightly concerned about Iran. And because they need to understand that Iran and Russia have now made an alliance where Iran is assisting Russia, particularly with drone technology, to reap even greater destruction on Ukraine. I now believe it should be understood to be in Israel's interest to try to undercut and prevent Iran from succeeding, because if Iran and Russia deepen their military alliance outside of Syria, where they've also been working together for a number of years, that is very dangerous for the entire world, but in particular for Israel. So Iron Dome, other means of defense, I think defensive measures are called for, and wherever they come from, the United States, other NATO nations, Israel, now is the time to send a very clear message to both Russia and Iran that their behavior, their bombardment of Ukraine, they're learning lessons that they could maybe apply in invading, occupying, or bombing other nations will be stopped right now. So yes, I agree completely with those calls, and I hope that there's a lot of conversation going on to try to move forward on that.
So on Iran, because clearly the whole world is watching the very brave women and girls there stand up for their rights, and we've also seen the crackdown. We also know that this is all sort of complicated for the United States with all sorts of other policy, trying to get Iran, to come back into the nuclear accord, which, by the way, it was a U.S. president who brought the world out of that. I spoke to the current Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, on this program yesterday and asked him what more the U.S. could do to support the rights of Iranian women. Obviously, the U.S. isn't going to intervene, militarily to overthrow any government. But what do you think, if you were Secretary of State, the U.S. can do? And I think you were during the Green Revolution.
Yes. Well, first of all, during the Green Revolution in 2009, we made a decision based on the best intelligence and information we had at the time that overt American support for the protests would actually hurt those protests and the protesters themselves. So behind the scenes, we tried to keep social media operating so that people could communicate and organize. Now I think it's very different than it was 13 years ago. What's happening now deserves our full-throated support. And I think every time anyone speaks on behalf of the United States government, they need to be saying that they stand with the people of Iran, particularly with the women and girls. I also think we should continue to take whatever action is possible through international bodies. I was part of a group of women leaders who called for the UN to kick Iran off the UN Commission on the Status of Women. They should never have been on there in the first place. And I believe we're moving toward that actually being accomplished. At least it better be, because it's the right thing to do. But I also believe that we need to keep the world's attention focused. I did an event last week with a group of Iranian American women and artists who were really pleading to keep eyes on Iran. Don't lose focus on covering what's happening inside. And Christiane, I want to thank you for refusing to put on a hijab to continue an interview with the president of Iran, because we need to be standing with the people of Iran. Now, you know that the issues are much more than even the oppression of compulsory hijab, but that is a symbol of what that oppression means to the lives, the freedom, the opportunities of the women of Iran. So this is something our government needs to keep speaking out about. And finally, I would not be negotiating with Iran on anything right now, including the nuclear agreement. I think that, frankly, horse is out of the barn. When Trump pulled us out, we lost the eyes that we had on what they were doing inside Iran. And I believe that they started those centrifuges spinning again, and I think it's unlikely that any agreement would be agreed to, and I don't think we should look like we're seeking an agreement at a time when the people of Iran are standing up to their oppressors, and we are giving them hope and heart. And I think we're doing something else. We're sending a message to whoever the few possibly concerned people are about what's happening to the tens of thousands of Iranians being imprisoned and the many hundreds who are being killed, that maybe they are willing inside to speak out, not just within the government, but more importantly with the clerics, to say that this is not sustainable. We have to move back from this. You can't premise a theocracy on covering up women's hair. That doesn't mean we're going to overthrow the regime and they're going to leave peacefully. But I'm hoping that there can be some kind of internal discussions that might lead to, more freedom, but also less oppression. So all of that is going on at the same time. And the U.S. and others need to be on the side of the protesters and their very legitimate demands for the freedom that they deserve as the human rights of them and their fellow citizens should be recognized.
And in next door Afghanistan, obviously the United States has stepped up fully behind Ukraine, but not so behind Afghanistan. Unfortunately, the country was handed back to the Taliban, and now there are terrible draconian anti-female laws coming down the pike, despite all the pledges that were made a couple of years ago. I mean, that must really make you heartsick, even though it's a Democratic president, Democratic administration that took this decision.
Well, it was that came finally to the decision to evacuate, but it was a Republican president and Republican Secretary of State who signed the surrender agreement that really laid the groundwork for where we ended up. So there's enough responsibility to be, I think, allocated across our politics. But the bottom line is that the Taliban have so clearly demonstrated they are not going to abide by any agreement, written or oral, that they gave to anyone outside the country or within. They too, like the Ayatollahs in Iran, seem to think that their legitimacy depends in large part on keeping women out of sight, out of any kind of public role. So I think that we've got to do what we can to alleviate the humanitarian catastrophe inside Afghanistan and support those who are protesting and trying to change the behavior of the Taliban. That's not yet ripe. We don't know exactly what's going on inside Afghanistan, but we should be on the side of those who are, trying to, if not change the regime, force more openness.
Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, thank you. And of course, raising the voices of women at your conference in Arkansas. Thank you so much for joining us.
Two reasons you should care about what's happening in Iran. First, it's simple. The largest women's rights movement happening on the face of the planet right now is taking place in Iran. Iranian or non-Iranian, this is the first female-led counter-revolution we've had in human history. If you consider yourself a feminist, you should reconsider staying silent or distancing yourself from this topic. Second reason you should care about the movement in Iran. If these women are successful in overthrowing this Islamic regime, it will bust down the door for neighboring countries to follow suit. Women and girls in countries like Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Iraq are looking to these brave Iranian girls to pave the way for their own freedoms and futures. Two things you can do to help with the ongoing fight for freedom in Iran. First, use your voice. The Islamic regime has shut down the internet to silence the voices of their protesters and to mask their own brutality. If it feels too simple, it's because it is. The ask is that easy. Just keep their voices and their mission alive by reposting, resharing, or just by talking about what's happening. Second thing you can do to help the people of Iran. In line with keeping the story top of mind, vote for the brave women of Iran to be selected as the Times Person or Group of the Year. Recognition, attention, amplification is the name of the game right now to apply pressure to this regime until it topples. Zan, Zendegi, Azadi. Woman, life, freedom.
In 1977, Iran was called an island of stability, but already trouble was brewing inside the country.
The change was needed, but this wasn't that change.
Arrests started, schools were closed. We became refugees in the sense that we had nothing. They don't have equal rights with men in marriage, in inheritance, in divorce, child custody.
As youth of Iran, we were told to be meek and obedient.
We are always bored. Like they want to ride a bicycle, they can do it.
Women have been banned from attending men's sporting matches.
Women dress up as men to sneak into soccer stadiums.
Women have been banned from singing.
Compulsory veiling laws remain of concern in Iran, where appearing in public without a hijab is punishable by imprisonment.
So they're a very courageous group of women who collect signatures under a petition for equality between men and women.
Women have been facing the oppression in Iran for 43 years.
Thousands of people gathered at the final resting place of Mahsa Amini.
The 22-year-old died in custody last week. She'd allegedly violated the country's policy on headscarves.
برای توی کوچه رقصیدن برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن برای خواهرم خواهرت خواهرامون.
Women are seen leading the protests in Iran, taking off their headscarves, chanting slogans and calling for an end to compulsory hijab.
زندگی معمولی برای کودک زبالگرد و آرزوهاش.
There was a freedom of choice, and that's what we're fighting for.
So what we're seeing is actually women rising up and burning symbols of the state.
In cities across the world, protesters want change.
Until the women of Iran are free, we are going to stand with you.
Women, life, freedom.
Over these mountains is Iran, a regime that has succeeded in cutting many of its people off from the outside world. But disturbing stories detailing the authorities' brutal retribution, systematic sexual violence against anti-regime protesters have begun leaking out. We've come here to the Kurdish region of Iraq to try and find out more. This is Hannah, not her real name. A Kurdish Iranian woman recently smuggled out of Iran. She fears for her life. After taking off and burning her headscarf on the streets, she was arrested and detained by Iranian intelligence officers.
They choose the women who were pretty and suited their appetite. Then the officer would take one of them from the cell to a smaller, private room. They would sexually assault them there.
Hannah isn't only an eyewitness, she also was violated.
I feel shy talking about this. You can still see what the policeman did. Look here, on my neck. It's purplish. That is why I'm covering it. He forced himself on me.
Then a fight broke out with another protester, drawing away Hannah's attacker. Hannah and others could hear screams, and they believe a woman was raped in an interrogation room. Hannah sketched out the police station as she remembers it. She estimates 70 to 80 men and women were together in a main hall that accessed 4 private interrogation rooms. It was in these interrogation rooms, she says, that she was assaulted and others were raped. CNN was able to locate the police station through Hannah's description, eyewitness corroboration, and geolocation using key landmarks. It's in the Islamabad neighborhood of Urmia. Based on this testimony and speaking to a number of sources, a pattern of repression comes into focus. Police centers used as filtration points, moving protesters from one location to another. Often families left not knowing where their loved ones are held. One Iraq-based Kurdish militant opposition party, PAK, identified over 240 people who they believe are missing within this maze of detention centers. Human rights organizations believe the number is higher, in the thousands. Some of the victims as young as 14. Many are men supporting female protesters, their punishment as severe as the women's.
They brought 4 men over who'd been beaten, screaming intensely in another cell, and one of the men who was tortured was sent to the waiting room where I was. I asked him what all that screaming was about. He said they are raping the men.
Based on witness testimony, CNN traced the location to an Iranian army intelligence headquarters. Voiced here by a translator, a 17-year-old boy sent CNN a voice note following his imprisonment. We are withholding his name and location for his safety.
When a security guard heard me discussing the rape of the other inmates, he started torturing me all over again. They tortured, raped me from behind.
Even as authorities visited sexual violence on protesters, regime figures accused female protesters of prostitution, of, quote, wanting to be naked. Of the incidents of sexual violence against protesters inside Iranian detention facilities, most occurred in the Kurdish majority areas to the west of Iran, home to a historically oppressed minority. Disturbingly, in some cases, the rapes were filmed and used to blackmail protesters into silence. There has been a real escalation, where female protesters are, as you can see here, being openly assaulted, often sexually. But the violence against women, like the protests, are not confined to the Kurdish areas. They are often focused on locations where the protests are most intense, like here in the capital, Tehran. One of these stories is Armita Abbasi's, a typical 20-year-old on social media, sharing her love of animals and music. In social media posts appearing under her name, Abbasi, like many young women in Iran, criticized the regime openly after the protests began. Unlike most, she did it without anonymity. It didn't take long for security forces to find and arrest her. Abbasi disappeared. Soon after, whistleblowers began to post on various social media platforms. Medics sharing eyewitness accounts of what had been done to Abbasi. First of all, they say, there were a few plainclothes men with her and they did not let her out of their sight. Even during a private medical examination, they were there. She was my patient. I went to her bedside. They had shaved her hair. She was scared and was trembling. When she first came in, they said it was rectal bleeding due to repeated rape. The plainclothesmen insisted that the doctor write that the rape was from prior to her arrest, and then after this issue was becoming obvious to all, they changed the entire scenario altogether. The details of these leaks were confirmed to CNN by an insider at Imam Ali Hospital, where Abbasi was brought to be examined. In a statement, the government said Abbasi was treated for digestive problems. The medics who treated her said that was not true. The Iranian regime denies the rape, accusing her of leading protests, an allegation which could see her face the death penalty. At this usually busy border crossing between Iraq and Iran, it is deceptively quiet. Those who can cross tell us the noose is tightening on protesters. Authorities have, for decades, used sexual torture against Iranians, and it appears once more a familiar pattern. Sexual violence deployed to enforce an assertion of moral guardianship.
یه شرمندگی برای بی پولی برای
قلقم میشن کجایی ارتش؟ چرا به داد ما نمیرسی؟ ما از مرگ نمیترسیم برادم، اگه میترسیدیم نمیآمدیم وسط خیابان. ما از بی کسی میترسیم، از تنهایی میترسیم، از اینکه بخوریم زمینی اجنبی ها دست بزنن به دختر و زن ایرانی. ارتش کجایی؟ چرا بلند نمیشی؟ چرا به داد ما نمیرسی؟ تو سلاح داری، تو آموزش نظامی دیدی. او بچه 16-17 ساله هیچی از جنگ نمیدانه، فقط آزادیشو میخواد، برای آزادی داره تلاش میکنه، فقط داره میاد وسط آزادی رو فریاد میزنه. اما ارتش تو دیدی، تو مسئولی در مقابل مردم سرزمینت. در مذهبشان مرد که در امن و امان است، زن بچه بیار و افرای لذتشان است. یک مرد مجاز است جا زن بگیرد، این سکس گروهی است یا قتل زنان است یا قیمت نان است. یک آب فقط در پی اندام زنانم، اندر کف یک صورت و یک سینه برانم. هی منتظر باد نشستن که شاید بالا ببرد، رو کند آنچه پی آنم، ابلیس زمانم.
In Iran has triggered horror and fear beyond Iran's borders. Even here, people are looking over their shoulders. There are clear signs the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, an arm of the Iranian military known for torturing, even murdering activists who speak out against the regime, has reached its way into Canada. Tonight, in a special report, we speak with some of those at risk who say the government isn't doing enough to help.
A protest in Halifax about brutality in Iran. You would hope people would feel and be safe doing this in Canada. At least that's how it should be.
We are together. This is the time.
I call on Canadian government to protect my fellow activists in Canada because I know that their life is in danger.
Making an appearance, Iranian activist Masih Alinejad, who now lives in the U.S. and lives under guard. In 2019, the FBI revealed a plot to assassinate her in the States. That same investigation had disturbing news for Iranian activists in Canada.
They told me that the same group were trying to kidnap, harass the Iranian Canadian activists.
The threats were specific, a plot to kidnap 3 people in Canada. CSIS has now confirmed that report and those threats. None of this surprises some Iranians in Canada who've been scared for a while.
You mentioned that you have this feeling that the Revolutionary Guard are kind of keeping an eye on you here.
Yes, exactly.
And you think it's through your devices?
I'm not sure. Maybe they're already here.
You think it's like a physical surveillance?
Yes, exactly.
Mariam Shapafour was once held in solitary confinement in Tehran's notorious Evin prison. Canada was supposed to be a refuge, only something strange is happening. Family back home are being interrogated and told exact details of Mariam's life here.
So the Revolutionary Guard told your sister that your apartment windows open onto a school? And is that accurate?
Yes.
How would they have known that?
I'm not sure.
So what else did they know about you?
For example, I have 3 cats. It's really scared me. Just because of that, I asked help from police or CSIS, but I haven't heard back from them.
We're having this conversation just outside the University of Toronto, where there's a laboratory of sorts.
We want to take your phones and your computers and see if there's any nefarious software on there keeping an eye.
Destination the Citizen Lab. Part of the work here is investigating digital espionage and attempts to surveil or harass human rights activists.
They have extensive technologies that enable them to drill right down into people's personal mobile phones, know where they are, with whom they're communicating, ranging all the way to hacking.
Ron Diebert and his team know these threats, alerted Saudi dissidents in Canada to spyware being implanted on their phones by that regime.
They're trying to hack the Gmail. All my social accounts are on.
Mariam's worries worry them too, so they need to see her phone. It's not an easy thing to talk about, and the wait to see if she's been hacked is stressful.
The phone has not been hacked.
In the end, they don't see spyware, but they do see nearly 35 attempts to change her Instagram password, some 18 efforts to trick her into changing her Gmail credentials.
But also it's common actually for people in your situation to have agents or people who are sympathetic to the government within Canada follow them around, maybe try to intimidate them or even physically assault them.
All these things just really scared me. Just cut my relationship with all my Iranian friends. It was huge for me. I totally isolate myself.
Still recovering from the trauma of jail and interrogations, she needs and misses those connections. There is community out there, Iranian Canadians who've been taking to Canada's streets to protest the regime's brutality, but that's getting risky too.
I know multiple people that have been getting multiple death threats.
These two say it feels like someone's trying to silence criticism of the regime, maybe lure them back to Iran or worse.
Do you feel like they were watching you if you did go to those protests?
Of course. I personally have witnessed multiple people trying to record people's faces. So I'm 100% sure that there are some people who are basically collecting information.
Does that sound familiar to you?
It sounds very familiar.
Look at the lengths they're going to feel safe enough to talk. No names, no faces, not even their real voices.
So what happened to you?
Like a month ago, I got a text. It says, "Warning, Communicating with the elements of the enemy abroad through email, secure portals, and other practical means of communication is criminal. It's crucial for you to disconnect. This SMS is the last security warning.
So my phone rang. Sort of a Persian accent in English told me, "Hey, why are you posting so much about Iran on your social media?" He kept repeating that. I was terrified, and I dropped the call. A couple of days later, I received another no caller ID call. This time, the person knew my name.
How do you get your phone number?
That's a very good question.
Together, they decided they had to go to police.
The police officer that's in the reception, he was like, "Okay, but like we can't do anything."
I feel like the police, whether in Toronto or anywhere in Canada, they're late. They wait until someone dies and then they will do something.
Just like Mariam, a call for help from authorities goes unanswered, even when it's now acknowledged there are active plots in Canada to target Iranian activists. And while confidence in police slips, some feel they have to do the police work themselves.
People can send us information.
Adashir Zazaradeh collects tips on possible regime figures in Canada.
We are collecting information, investigating, documenting them, and probably we will publish some of the names and will provide the list to the government and demand some actions.
So you're doing their investigative work for them?
Exactly. Well, we have to take actions in our hand because we are scared and we care about Canada's peace and security.
He's the owner of a legal services firm. He spent 2 years in solitary confinement in Iran, only to come to Canada and get a visit at his Toronto office from an Iranian intelligence officer.
Intelligence service officer just called me, my office actually, from a public phone, Bell Pay phone, to get an appointment. He showed up in this place in the lobby and wanted to see me.
Something was familiar about how the man was behaving and what he was asking. Adashir stopped the meeting, called the FBI, who eventually confirmed the person was a known threat.
So the FBI was worried?
Yeah.
And they communicated with you?
Yeah.
Did the RCMP communicate at all?
No, the RCMP never responded to my messages. What's wrong with the government? Why they are not taking action?
Good question. Think again about Mariam sitting in the Citizen Lab learning how to protect herself online. Their help matters. To speak out in Iran is beyond brave. It shouldn't have to be in Canada.
Now, we reached out to CSIS, the Minister of Public Safety, and the RCMP for comment. The RCMP were the only ones who got back to us in time, saying they believe the problem is growing and that they have ongoing investigations into threats to Canadians from the Islamic Revolutionary Guards. But they couldn't say how widespread these threats are due to, quote, underreporting, which raises some questions about how prepared the system is to handle them. We will have more on this story soon, as will the Fifth Estate next week.
To see what is happening in the country. The images of children killed, of women beaten in the streets, of people sentenced to death. We have seen waves of protests over the past years, calling for justice, equality, dignity and respect for human rights. They have been met with violence and repression. The unnecessary and disproportionate use of force must come to an end. The old methods and the fortress mentality of those who wield power simply don't work. In fact, they only aggravate the situation. We are now in a full-fledged human rights crisis. The current protests sparked on 16 September following the death in custody of Gina Mahsa Amini have expanded throughout the country. Protests have reportedly taken place in over 150 cities and 140 universities in all 31 provinces of Iran. Minority regions continue to be disproportionately affected, especially in terms of casualties. Some of their representatives in Parliament have voiced criticism towards the response by the authorities to these protests. Women, young people, men from across society, students, workers from various sectors, athletes and artists are clamoring for change with incredible courage to bring an end to discriminatory laws and practice against women and girls, for the full respect of the rights and freedoms of all the people of Iran, for inclusion and equality, for a better, more just future. I urge the government and those in power to listen, to acknowledge the deep-seated social, economic and political grievances that have been building up, to heed people's demands for their rights to be protected and for their voices to be heard, to accept the legitimacy of those calling for different visions of society. Women and girls must be able to feel free and secure in public without fear of violence or harassment, to live in safety and be able to participate in public life on equal footing with men. Young people need to know that they can peacefully express their opinions without fear of arrest and imprisonment. Señor Presidente, the current situation is untenable. Since the protests began, security forces have reportedly responded by using lethal force against unarmed demonstrators and bystanders who posed no threat to life, in blatant disregard of international rules on the use of force. The security forces, notably the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Basij forces, have used live ammunition, birdshot and other metal pellets, tear gas and batons. According to reliable sources, a conservative estimate of the death toll so far stands at over 300, including at least 40 children. This is unacceptable. We received reports that injured protesters fear going to hospital for risk of being arrested by the security forces. Medical professionals have publicly denounced interference by security forces in the treatment of injured persons. From what we could gather, around 14,000 people, including children, have so far been arrested in the context of these protests. This is a staggering number. I'm alarmed by reports that even children suspected of having participated in protests are being arrested at school. Hundreds of university students have been summoned for questioning, threatened or suspended and barred from entering university campuses. Civil society actors have been targeted and arrested from their homes and workplaces, among them human rights defenders, journalists and lawyers. Arrested protesters continue to be denied access to a lawyer. Many face national security charges with lengthy prison sentences. There are troubling reports of physical and psychological torture and ill treatment of protesters in detention, to extract forced confessions, with some of them broadcast on state media. Families of victims are harassed and targeted. According to official sources, at least 21 people arrested in the context of these protests currently face the death penalty, of which at least 6 have been sentenced to death on charges of Moharabeh and Ifsad Felard, inconsistent with international standards. We have seen statements that seek to delegitimize and label protesters, civil society actors and journalists as agents of enemies and foreign states. That's a convenient narrative. As we have seen throughout history, it's the typical narrative of tyranny, to distract from the root causes of grievances. The people of Iran from all walks of life, across ethnicities, across ages, are demanding change. These protests are rooted in long-standing denials of freedoms, in legal and structural inequalities, in lack of access to information, in internet shutdowns. For decades, women and girls have been held back by pervasive discrimination in law and practice. And in the absence of any effective channels to raise their concerns, fears and frustrations have multiplied. People have become disillusioned in the absence of prospects for any real reforms. So they have taken to the streets. Mr. President, my office has received multiple communications from the government on the events, including domestic investigations into Mrs. Amini's death. We remain concerned that the investigations have failed to meet international standards of impartiality, independence and transparency. Persistent impunity for human rights violations remains one of the major challenges in Iran, further fueling discontent and distrust. Political and security considerations have weakened the independence and impartiality of institutions that are vital to ensuring accountability. Yet, accountability is a key ingredient of the pursuit of justice for human rights violations. I therefore call for independent, impartial and transparent investigative processes into alleged violations of human rights that are consistent with international standards. I'm also deeply concerned by the alarming increase in the number of executions since 2021, particularly for drug-related charges. As of September 22, the overall number of executions had reportedly passed 400 for the year, for the first time in 5 years. This is a substantial increase from at least 330 and 276 executions in 21 and 22 respectively. And at least 85 individuals who were children at the time of committing the alleged offence are currently on death row. They too were executed this year. Mr. President, the Islamic Republic of Iran has accepted recommendations made through this Council's Universal Periodic Review on guaranteeing the right to a fair trial, access to justice, ensuring freedom from torture and detention, and ensuring the rights of detainees, including to medical treatment. I urge the government to implement these key recommendations as a matter of urgency. I call on the authorities immediately to stop using violence and harassment against peaceful protesters and to release all those arrested for peacefully protesting, as well as, crucially, to impose a moratorium on the death penalty. Societies are constantly evolving and changing. No society can be calcified or fossilized as it may stand at a single point in time. To attempt to do so against the will of its people is futile.
Some have told us that we should not single out one country. I hear you. The United Nations were founded to protect the sovereignty of every state. But a regime that uses this power to violate the rights of its own people is violating the values of our United Nations. The High Commissioner and the Special Rapporteur has just made this very clear. What these rights are is not upon anyone's interpretation. These rights are stated here in black and white in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, to which Iran is a state party. I quote Article 19, the right to hold opinions without interference. I quote Article 21, the right of peaceful assembly. I quote Article 2, the respect of all people's rights without distinction of any kind, such as gender or political opinion. On many occasions we have called upon Iran to respect these rights, to stop the violent crackdown on protesters, the bloodshed, the arbitrary killing, the mass arrests, the death penalties. The only answer we received was more violence, more death, along with Iran's continuing refusal to give the United Nations Special Rapporteur access to the country, as we have just heard. That is why we are now proposing that an independent and impartial UN mechanism to be established to investigate these human rights violations so that those responsible can be held accountable. Because impunity prevents justice. Justice for sisters, justice for sons, justice for mothers. They have names: Gina, Adufazel, Minou. Today is about them. Today is also a test of our courage here in the United Nations, about our courage to speak out. We each represent our state, but we also represent millions of men, women and children. So I call on you, be the voice of these, of our people of the United Nations. As they sing in Iran, for dancing in the street, for women, life, freedom, for our human rights.
Certainly a matter of urgency because people in Iran are dying every day at the hands of the government of Iran. Women are being killed, children are being killed, innocent civilians are dying. And while Iranian authorities have done their best to hide from the world what is happening by cutting off internet and access to social media, the world knows who is responsible for this. I'm sure every senator in this chamber has received countless emails and social media messages and phone calls from the Iranian community making clear that they want action, not just words, from our government. It has been more than 2 months since Mahsa Jina Amini was killed. I've been calling for urgent action by the government since the week of her death back in September. It is completely mystifying to the Iranian-Australian community why our government hasn't chosen to act sooner and faster. A fortnight ago, when the opposition asked the Prime Minister why Australia was yet to apply the same targeted sanctions that our allies have, the Prime Minister quite disgracefully chose to talk about considering the implications for businesses before acting. This is a situation where women are being beaten in the streets by their government for not covering their hair. Children are being shot and killed by the military. It is not a time to be sitting around mulling over business dealings with Iran. It is time to act. Other countries have acted and have applied multiple rounds of sanctions to Iran. This government likes to talk about acting in concert with our partners and the international community. But that is precisely the opposite of what they've done when it comes to sanctioning individuals responsible for killing women and children in Iran. 6 days ago, Canada announced its 5th round of sanctions in response to the recent violence and human rights abuses. In that same time, our government has announced 0 sanctions. The US has announced multiple rounds of sanctions directly in response to the current violence. So has the UK. Australia, none. These sanction notices provide long lists of individuals within the Iranian regime who our allies have identified and taken action against, along with detailed explanations of why they are being sanctioned. Yet when I ask the Foreign Minister and the Department of Foreign Affairs whether we agree with our allies that those individuals deserve to be sanctioned, all we receive in response is no comment, we can't discuss that. By the way, if you go and look at the Hansard for those Foreign Affairs estimates held 13 days ago, we still haven't had a transcript published. What is going on? Not only can the community not get answers from the government, they can't even access a record of official proceedings of the Parliament from 2 weeks ago. I am pleased that yesterday the Minister confirmed that government agencies tasked with countering foreign interference have been tasked to look at the threats and intimidation made to Australian critics of the Iranian regime. This is an incredibly serious matter, one that I raised in estimates myself and have subsequently raised with our eSafety Commissioner in written correspondence. Security and intelligence services around the world are making clear that this is a very real and very dangerous matter. MI5 has confirmed that Iran's intelligence services have made at least 10 attempts to kidnap or even kill British nationals or people based in the United Kingdom regarded by Tehran as a threat. And meanwhile, as if what they're doing to their own civilians isn't bad enough, we know that Iran is arming Russia with drones to kill Ukrainian civilians. Once again, our allies have sanctioned Iranian authorities over this, but Australia, according to the Minister's answer to my questions earlier this week, has not. It is not good enough for Australia to be lagging behind our allies in responding to this human rights crisis with targeted sanctions. Iran is growing bolder every day in their violence and their threats to international peace and security. It is time for Australia to play our part in holding them to account.
As a symptom of its authoritative nature, the Iranian regime not only increases oppression internally, it also undermines international rule-based order by providing weapons to feed Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. The weapons that are mercilessly killing Ukrainian civilians and destroying our civilian infrastructure in violation of international humanitarian and human rights law. Any state that employs such practices at home and abroad has to be scrutinized by this Council. Therefore, Ukraine supported the convening of the special session and was among early co-sponsors of the resolution establishing a fact-finding mission to investigate ongoing violations. We stand with the people of Iran as they continue fighting for their rights to live in dignity and freedom. I think.
The situation of women in my country, it should be noted that according to credible statistics and reports, the Islamic Republic of Iran has achieved greatly in empowering women and girls, as well as in protecting and promoting their roles and rights in social and public life in the past 4 decades, particularly in the field of education, health, industry, economy, sports and politics, where equal opportunities for women have been provided in all areas of personal and public life.
گزار خوشمضمون اگر بتوانید یک سرود زیبای اثرگذار خوشمضمون درست کنید جوری که بچه‌ها وقتی تو کوچه راه میرن از خانه به مدرسه میرن زیر لبشون اون زمزمه کنن.
Arrested. The video you're seeing now is from the Instagram of one of them in public without a headscarf. Another was also detained after showing support for the movement. Meantime, fears grow of a bloody crackdown in the Kurdish Iranian city of Mahabad. Joining me now on the latest is Maziar Bahari. He's an Iranian-Canadian filmmaker, he was a journalist, and he's a human rights activist. He founded the Iran Wire website, which connects Iranian journalists across the world with citizens inside the country, which is very, very useful given the amount of censorship. Maziar, welcome to the program. And many might remember that your story of yourself being arrested after the 2009 protests led to a film, in fact, and a book directed by Jon Stewart, Rosewater. So just to place you in context, what do you make of this report? Is this the first time we're hearing of these kinds of terrible abuses and violations?
No, unfortunately, this is the culmination of 60 years of sexual suppression by Ayatollah Khomeini, his supporters, and then since 1979 by his government. Why am I saying 60 years? Yeah. Because when you remember the Ayatollah Khomeini started his movement in 1962 because the Shah of Iran, gave women and religious minorities the right to vote. And Khomeini said that if women have the right to vote, there are going to be prostitutes. So because of that, since 1979, when Khomeini came to power, they have been suppressing women. They have been denying women of their rights. And the whole government, I can say, has been sexualized. And the movement against the government has been sexualized as well. Sex has become an instrument of suppression. I know that you did a series about sex. Sex has become an instrument of suppression in the hands of the government. And then you see such atrocities happening in Iranian prisons when interrogators, torturers, sexual perverts who've been suppressed sexually, they have a free rein in order to, and they can treat the prisoners however they want, especially female prisoners.
So I never heard it put that way. I mean, that really does put this whole issue in context. And, you know, we've heard of sexual violence and perversion, frankly, whether it comes to the Taliban, whether it comes to many of these kinds of societies where they use that kind of violence.
I mean, sexual suppression is not something new in Iran. Sexual atrocities in Iran is not something new. In the 1980s, many women, many female prisoners who were going to be executed had to be forced to marry one of the Revolutionary Guards, because a virgin cannot be executed according to the Sharia law. So they were forced to be married and raped by those Revolutionary Guards in order to be executed. Just imagine the atrocities. And now we are seeing this because of social media. And during the recent protests, because it's a women-led protest, this sexual violence has come to the surface. And we can hear more about it.
So there's just so much here that needs to be unpacked. First and foremost, you just talked about the internet, and it's true, it's pretty much the only way we're getting information. Pretty much, unless people can pick up the phone and call into Iran. But we know that there's been a lot of internet censorship. We're just hearing now that there's been a massive disruption in the Iranian Kurdish area, which is the homeland of Mahsa Amini, and which has faced the worst kind of crackdown since her death and the protests. Do you feel that you are getting with Iran Wire, and we're getting accurate information and timely information about what's going on, given the strict restrictions against information going in and out?
Unfortunately, not as much as we want, because the government sometimes shut down the international internet, so people do not have access to Google, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, different platforms that need cloud. And sometimes it even shuts down the national internet. So even the Iranian ministries and organizations, they cannot communicate with each other. And in certain cases, like what we see in Kurdistan, in certain parts of Kurdistan right now, even there is no landline. So people cannot communicate. Fortunately, there are many Kurds who live on the border with Iraq, so they can pick up the signals from the Iraqi side, and that's why we receive some information from Kurdistan right now. If it was not for the Iraqi signals, we would not have any information.
As to the actual movement and the actual protests, you know, it really has galvanized a lot of the world. We just reported, and we'll show some more pictures of the latest 2 Iranian actresses who still live there, having posted their posters, their pictures on Instagram.
All very brave women.
Yeah, very brave. And one of them said, "This might be my last post. From this moment on, if anything happens to me, know that I will always be with the people of Iran until my last breath." So I guess the question to you is, where does the protest, does the uprising stand now? Because you don't see as many streets full of people, full of women. What are you hearing about where it is?
Well, you know, we are all surprised by the continuation of the protest. Even the protesters in Iran, they did not think that they would be on the streets of Tehran and all 31 provinces of Iran, different cities in all 31 provinces of Iran, more than 2 months after the death of Mahsa Amini. What you said about the actress really goes to the roots of this movement. When Mahsa Amini died, because the morality police arrested her and beat her up, that really resonated with many Iranians, especially Iranian women. They could see themselves as a potential Mahsa Amini. They can be arrested at any point by any idiot who has some power in Iran. It can be the morality police, it can be someone from the judiciary, it can be the paramilitary Basij, it can be Revolutionary Guards. Anyone with a gun in Iran can arrest you and can do whatever you want. And that is the issue that the protesters are protesting against in Iran. And when the protest started in September, on September 16th, because of Mahsa Amini's death, it was about hijab and it was about her. But now, more than 2 months later, it's about the death of the regime.
It's really changed, hasn't it? I mean, I was going to ask you whether other actors I was going to use the word hijacked it for their own agenda. Maybe that's the wrong word. Has it morphed?
Well, sometimes, of course, in any movement, in any part of the world, there are certain people who try to hijack it. But what is happening right now in Iran is that the average age of a protester in Iran is between 16 to 22. So these are young people who do not have any memory of the 1979 revolution, the 1980 to 1988 war with Iraq. They do not identify with their ideals, with the ideals of their fathers and grandfathers and even older brothers, and they want regime change now. In 2009, when millions of people...
You were covering it.
When I was covering it.
They called it the Green Revolution.
Exactly, the Green Movement. When people were marching silently on the streets, when they were passing by the murals of Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, they were silent. They were looking at him with disappointment. But now, the main slogan is death to the dictator, death to Khamenei, and, you know, saying obscenities about Khamenei, his family, and his office.
What do you think is the conversation going on in Khamenei's office or in the Majlis or in the presidency or within the security services forces? Are they trying to figure out a way out of this? Are they trying to figure out a way to crush it?
They don't understand it because the average age of an Ayatollah in Iran and people at the helm of the government in Iran is about 70. So, and they're all men. So these old, aging men, they do not understand a movement that is led by young women. And Khamenei, the other day, he said that these people are just weak and too small for us to even think about them, and they cannot do anything to us. Of course, the security apparatus, they are all over themselves. Iran has been really preparing itself for a foreign invasion since 2001, when after 9/11, when the US and its allies invaded Afghanistan. But it has not been ready. The Islamic Republic has not been ready for an internal, for a domestic protest like this at this level. So they are clueless about what's going on, but they are resorting to what they know, which is detainment, torture, execution, sham trials. And this is just the beginning. Right now, at least 15 people have been sentenced to death. We will see more of that. We will soon see sham trials. There are social media persecution of different opposition members, different journalists by trolls, by Islamic Republic trolls. At least 60 professional journalists are in prison right now. More than 200 citizen journalists are in prison right now. So the government is all over itself. They don't know what to do. And at the same time, it's a government that is corrupt, that has been mismanaging the country for the past 4 decades. And much of the protest that we see on the streets right now is because of that mismanagement and corruption.
Did you think you would see, has this happened in the past, such young people being tortured, being killed? There's a very powerful report by our colleague friend Farnaz Fasihi in the New York Times detailing with dozens of interviews inside and outside what's happened to young people, what is happening to young people right now under 18, including the little boy of 9 or 10 who was killed.
Yeah.
I mean, and then telling the parents, don't tell. And claiming everything was suicide, not in this case, but in many other cases.
Yeah, unfortunately, many Iranians of my generation, we've seen this movie before. In the early 1980s, the Islamic Republic arrested thousands of people, and in 1988, they killed 5,000 people within a few days. So we've seen this movie before, and we are really fearing that they want to repeat an atrocity like that again.
So if you were to be asked right now, where do you think this leads to, what would you say?
It is very difficult to say, and anyone who tells you with certainty what is going to happen, he or she is lying, because what has happened in Iran in September 16th surprised everyone, and the continuation of it has been surprising people as well. What we can do as journalists outside of Iran is just to be the voice of the people. And this is what is different between this protest and the protest in the 2009 is that this is a leaderless movement. In 2009, you had two leaders, Mir Hossein Mousavi and Karoubi, who were regime insiders and who were leading the Green movement. But right now, the movement is led by many unknown people. That's why the regime cannot control it. The regime does not know that this is Mousavi, they can detain and put him under house arrest. The movement in different neighborhoods, in different cities, in different towns.
By now, most of you have heard the name Mahsa Amini.
Mahsa
Gina Amini. Mahsa Amini.
Mahsa Gina Amini.
Mahsa Amini.
Mahsa Gina
Amini. A 22-year-old
22-year-old Iranian Kurdish woman
who was arrested and detained
by the Iranian morality police. Her crime?
Her crime?
Improper hijab.
While in custody, she was dealt so many blows to her head
That she fell into a coma and died 2 days later.
Since then, the people of Iran have poured into the streets,
demanding justice for Mahsa.
Justice for Mahsa.
demanding justice for Mahsa.
And for the millions of Iranians fighting for their basic human rights. basic human rights.
Basic human rights and freedoms. The government has shut down
internet service.
To stop the free flow of information.
And to cover up their killing of protesters.
We must stand in solidarity with the Iranian people.
that the world hears their cries.
Keep hashtagging, keep amplifying. Post, retweet, share. Let's show the Iranian people that we are with them.
We must stand in solidarity with the Iranian people.
We all have to speak up. Woman.
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 Life.
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 Freedom.
Freedom. Freedom. Zan, zendegi, azadi. Zan, zendegi, azadi. Zan, zendegi, azadi. Zan, zendegi, azadi.
Madam President, Iran claims to be an Islamic republic. But as this resolution makes clear, it is also one of the world's most repressive regimes. I therefore have a question to the mullahs in Tehran. If you represent a God that is good, powerful, and merciful, then why do you need to repress, torture, and murder your people so much? No, your regime is a blasphemy and an abomination to every decent Muslim, every person of faith, and every person of conscience. You have brought your country to such desperate straits that you are now signing agreements with China to give away your energy sector and to give away your critical infrastructure. They will not complain about your human rights abuses, but I'm not sure Allah will be pleased that you are becoming vassals to a godless communist regime. However, if you want better relations and the easing of sanctions with us, stop this repression now. This is inhuman what you're doing to your own people. And one last thing. I have a request to the diplomats from our nation states and from our European External Action Service. Next time you meet with Mr. Zarif, who is a smiling Ribbentrop, just remember what kind of nasty regime he represents. Thank you.
Did you know that the game of polo was initially played by Iranian tribes? Both males and females used to play this game and still do all over Iran today. It only spread to the west when they, of course, invaded the east, the region of Iran, over 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. Males and females were known to have equal rights. This has been reported endlessly on cuneiform Old Persian texts by the religious beliefs that they had at the time, Zoroastrianism, and even by Greek and Romans who would write about how backwards their society was for accepting females and not putting them into slavery. Archaeologists have found all over the Caspian Sea these mounds, and inside the mounds are tombs, many of them belonging to female ancient warriors. Now, Zoroastrianism is one of the oldest religions recorded on earth. Its fundamental practice is good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. They believe in one god, Ahura Mazda. Ahura is a masculine word for Lord, and Mazda is actually a feminine word, which means wisdom. There are still around 200,000 Zoroastrians that live all across the world. Traditions such as Nowruz, the Iranian New Year, which is on the spring solstice, is Zoroastrian.
سلام دوستان، امروز یه آموزش میخوام بهتون بدم که توی تظاهرات بتونین به راحتی استفاده کنین و یه سلاح تقریبا قدرتمند داشته باشید. همونجور که میبینید تیراش توی چوب رفته، با اینکه یه دونه میخ معمولی خیلی سبک هست. شما میتونید به جای این میخایی که توی آموزش بهتون یاد میدم از میخای فولادی استفاده کنید و میخای به مراتب یه مقدار سنگین تر که قدرت خیلی بیشتری داشته باشه. بریم با هم دیگه آموزش رو ببینیم. توی چند دقیقه میتونین همچین سلاح مرگباری داشته باشید. خب ببینید دوستان، ما تیرامون رو از هر جنسی میتونیم استفاده بکنیم، از کاغذ، از پلاستیک، ولی بهتره از پلاستیک های مثل پلاستیک اسمارتیس، پلاستیک ماکارونی و یا هر چیز دیگه درست کنیم، چون ما قراره توی این لوله فوت بکنیم و بعد از اینکه چند بار استفاده کنیم داخلش خیس میشه و کاغذ سریع خراب میشه. ولی از این نوع که استفاده کنیم، مثلا بالفرض یه هدفی رو قراره به شلیک کنیم، بهش نخوره، بعدن دوستای دیگه هم میتونن از گوشه خیابون بردارن استفاده بکنن. یعنی دفعات زیادی میشه از این استفاده کرد. خب حالا بهتون میگم چجوری درست میشه. یه قیچی احتیاج داریم، اینو به یه ابعادی تقریبا یه ابعاد مثلا 10 در 15 سانتی دو تیکه تقسیمش میکنیم. اینو میکنیمش ابتدا شکل یه دونه قیف. این خیلی که داریم از این قسمت فرو میکنیم تا آخرش بیاد. بعدش احتیاج به چسب نواری داریم. اول این قسمتش رو گیر میدیم. بعدش به خاطر که نشتی هوا نداشته باشه یه مقدار احتیاج داریم که چسب بیشتری بزنیم، چون اگه نشتی هوا داشته باشه تیرمون خراب میشه یا خوب نمیره. همینجا کافی. خب اینو میندازیمش توی خود لوله پولیکا و حالا با یه دونه خودکار میتونیم اینجا خط بندازیم. حالا اگه خط هم ننداختیم نوت با قیچی هم میشه، زیاد مهم نیست که حتما اندازش خیلی دقیق باشه. یه خط میندازیم و بعدش میاریمش بیرون. از اینجا میبریمش. فقط باید نگاه بکنیم خیلی کیپ نباشه. الان یه چیز تقریبا خوبی هست. حالا میریم براتون تستش بکنیم. شما اونجا ببینید. این یکی دوستان الان 4 تا تیر رو میخوایم تست بکنیم. هرچند لوله‌مون خیلی کوتاه است، متأسفانه لوله بلندتر نداشتیم. ولی شما میتونید با لولای بلندتر قدرت بیشتری از این کار بگیرید. تیر اول، تیر دوم، تیر سوم، تیر چهارم. خب ببینید اون تیر آخری رو از فاصله نزدیکتر زدم. این تیر تقریبا فکر کنم اولمون بود که فاصلهش خیلی دورتر بود، باید به زور بکشمش بیرون. اینم همینطور و این تیرم همینطور.
میدونی چی گرفتم عوضش به جای جوونی کردن صبح تا شب باید کار کنم کراخونه بدم. میدونی پول چی رو گرفتم؟ پول این گرفتم که روز سال گرفتم دانشگاه دوشنبه 2000 تومان بود، الان شده 18000 تومان. فهمیدی پول چی رو گرفتم؟ تو پول چی رو گرفتی؟ تو پول چی رو گرفتی؟ حضرت معصومه 1400 سال پیش گریه کرد و دیدی جوونایی که الان می‌کشن نمی‌بینی. تو احمق، تو احمقی. تبریک میگم. به تو ربطی نداره، به تو هیچ ربطی نداره. دلم بخواد در میارم اینجا. فضولی نکن، سرت تو لاک خودت باشه. درد این جوونا رو بشنو بعد زر بزن الکی. مشکل تمام این پسرایی که نشستن اینجا موی من نیست. مشکلش اینه 2 روز که بخوان زن بگیرن هیچکی بهشون زن نمیده. میدونی چرا؟ چون خونه ندارن. نمیتونن هم بگیرن. خونه شده آرزو واسه اینا. آقای راننده لطفاً تذکر بدید. ماشین شده آرزو واسه اینا. نداره چسبیده 2 تا تار موی من. درسته.
What if I told you that I was the only firefighter in my hometown?
What if I told you I was the first to compete for my country in the Winter Olympics?
What if I told you I was the lead singer of an acclaimed rock and roll band and a computational geneticist who's been deemed one of the top 100 geniuses of our time?
What if I told you my photographs have been published in National Geographic, The New York Times, Newsweek, and Time magazine?
What if I told you that I won my nation's first ever motocross?
What if I told you I won a gold medal in the Paralympic Games?
What if I told you I was the first from my country to scale an 8,000-meter peak in the Himalayas?
What if I told you I became the first suffrage martyr in my country after appearing unveiled in public? They strangled me with a silk scarf, threw me into a garden well, and filled it with stones and soil.
If I told you that, would you believe that I'm a woman from Iran?
If I told you that, would you believe I was a woman from Iran?
If I told you that, would you believe that I'm a woman from Iran?
I am a woman from Iran.
I'm a woman from Iran. I'm a woman from Iran.
I am a woman from Iran.
I'm a woman from Iran. I'm often quoted as having said, "You can kill me as soon as you like, but you cannot stop the emancipation of women."
شکایتم از این زمان
کوچه رقصیدن، برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن، برای خواهرم، خواهرت، خواهرامون، برای تغییر مغزها که پوسیدن، برای شرمندگی، برای بیپولی، برای حسرت یک زندگی معمولی، برای کودک زباله‌گرد و آرزوهاش، برای این اقتصاد دستوری، برای این هوای آلوده، برای ولیعصر و درختای فرسوده، برای پیروز و احتمال انقراضش، برای سگهای بیگناه ممنوعه، برای گریه های بیوقفه، برای تصویر تکرار این لحظه، برای چهره ای که میخنده، برای دانش آموزا، برای آینده، برای این بهشت اجباری، برای نخبه های زندانی، برای کودکان افغانی، برای این همه برای غیر تکراری، برای این همه شعارهای تو خالی، برای آوار خونه های پوشالی، برای احساس آرامش، برای خورشید پس از شبای طولانی، برای قرصای اعصاب و بیخوابی، برای مرد میهن آبادی، برای دختری که آرزو داشت پسر بود، برای زن زندگی آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی.
For freedom.
از گلوی تو تا صدای ما، بلا چاو بلا چاو بلا چاو چاو چاو، میپریم از خواب یه شب مهتاب، یکی میگه آی آدم ها، یا همه با هم یا همه تنها، ما که بیداریم تا فردا، خاک این گندم تو خیابونه، خوشه خشم من و تو تشنه بارونه، حق ما کم نیست، زانوی غم نیست، قلب ما که دور از هم نیست، دنیای تاره این یه آغازه، پنجره تا رویا بازه، از گلوی تو تا صدای ما، بلا چاو بلا چاو بلا چاو چاو چاو، میپریم از خواب یه شب مهتاب، یکی میگه آی آدم ها، یا همه با هم یا همه تنها، ما که بیداریم. خواهی بی‌وقفه، برای تصویر تکرار این لحظه، برای موسیقی که میخوانده، برای دانش آموزا، برای
اینجا هستم که جوانای توی مملکتم که توی خیابونا دارن خواسته هاشون رو فریاد میزنن، بهشون بگم که ما با این که ازشون دوریم ولی پشتشون هستیم و حمایت میکنیم هر آنچه که میخوان. اونا آزادی میخوان، اونا زندگی میخوان که 43 سال این آزادی و این استقلال و زندگی رو ازشون گرفتن و من وظیفه خودم دونستم که در این راهپیمایی شرکت کنم و بهشون بگم تنها نیستن، کوتاه نیان، بیان تو خیابون. کسانی که هنوز توی خونه ها نشستن و دارن از دور نظاره‌گرن، بیان و کمک کنن و پشت این جوانا باشن، پشت این زنا باشن، پشت این دخترها باشن. اینا هستن که دارن تلاش میکنن اون زندگی ازشون گرفته شده رو پس بگیرن. منم اینجا هستم و حمایتشون میکنم.
برای توی کوچه رقصیدن، برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن، برای خواهرم، خواهرت، خواهرامون، برای تغییر مغزها که پوسیدن، برای شرمندگی، برای بیپولی، برای حسرت یک زندگی معمولی، برای کودک زباله‌گرد و آرزوهاش، برای این اقتصاد دستوری، برای این هوای آلوده، برای ولیعصر و درختای فرسوده، برای پیروز و احتمال انقراضش، برای سگهای بیگناه ممنوعه، برای گریه های بیوقفه، برای تصویر تکرار این لحظه، برای چهره ای که میخنده، برای آزادی، برای آزادی.
ای انسان‌های آزاده، در کنار ما باشید و ما را یاری کنید تا دولت‌ها دست از حمایت از این رژیم قاتل و کودک کش بردارند. این رژیم به هیچ اصلی، حتی اصول مذهبی خودش نیز وفادار نیست و جز زر و زور و حفظ قدرت قانون و قاعده‌ای به هر طریق ممکن نمی‌شناسد. تا چه زمانی باید شاهد ظلم و ستم از سوی خودکامگان سیاسی در هر نقطه‌ای از این جهان باشیم؟ آیا تجربه هیتلر، موسولینی، چاوشسکو، قذافی، صدام حسین، خمینی و این آخرینش خامنه‌ای کافی نیست تا جهانیان را به فکر راهی نوین بیاندازد؟ انتظار آن است که سازمان ملل و تمامی سازمان‌هایی که ارزش و اعتبار خود را از هدف آزادی و عدالت برای تمام بشریت می‌گیرند، با اجراء فعالیت‌های عملی و بازدارنده و مؤثر در قبال جنایات عریان و هولناکی که در ایران بر علیه زنان و مردان و کودکان در جریان است، دست از بی‌تفاوتی برداشته و از این آدم کشی و نسل کشی وحشتناک جلوگیری نمایند. ایرانیان آزاده و دلاور خود این رژیم خودکامه و ستمگر را سرنگون خواهند کرد. آنچه مورد نیاز است عدم حمایت از رژیمی است که در آبان 98 در طول 4 روز هزاران ایرانی را به قتل رساند و جهان تنها نظاره‌گر بود. این فاجعه و فجایع مشابه لکه ننگی است بر پیشانی بشریت. حال زمان آن رسیده است که تمامی کشورهای آزادیخواه به عنوان حرکتی نمادین و سمبولیک تمامی نمایندگان خود را از ایران فرا بخوانند و نمایندگان و وابستگان این رژیم سفاک را از کشورهای خود اخراج نمایند و بدین طریق اظهار همبستگی با مردم آزادیخواه ایران بنمایند. فرزندان شجاع ایرانی اکنون پرچمدار آزادی و عدالت و رهبران یکی از استثنایی ترین انقلاب‌های تاریخ بشریت هستند. صدای رسا و بلند آنان باشیم. از همه انسان‌های با وجدان جهان می‌خواهم که در کنار ما بایستند و از دولت‌های خود بخواهند که نه در حرف و کلام و شعار بلکه در عمل رژیم را به زیر فشار برده و هر گونه تعاملی با این رژیم را متوقف کنند. ما طلایه‌داران آن نسل بشری هستیم که جنس و رنگ و نژاد نمی‌شناسد و چون پدرمان کوروش بزرگ بر آزادی انسان‌ها و صلح و دوستی بی توجه به زبان و فرهنگ ایمان راسخ دارد. به امید آزادی و رهایی همه انسان‌ها از بند ناآگاهی و تعصب. زن، زندگی، آزادی.
هر دفعه اونجوری که میخواستی پیش نره خاطر هم داره خوابو میگیره ازم دوری و من دیگه ته دنیا قلبت نوک قله قابه من که تو زندگی میشکی نیست چه دروغی دارم بگم آخه این همه دوری نواسه تو خوبه نه من طرف تو بارون نمیشی دل تنگ زیاد میدونی چند وقت دلم تو رو میخواد اینجوری نکن با من هی دوری نکن با من این شوخی خوبی نیست من بی تو میمیرم واقعا اینجوری نرو سخته چرا قلب تو بیرحمه کی غیر تو با قلبش این حال منو میفهمه
במשקפיים, זה פחות או יותר לבל הטירוף שהיה, אבל כאילו אין דרך להסביר בכלל את מה שהלך באיצטדיון. הקהל היה חלק מהמשחק, הוא דחף את השחקנים, והאמת שאיראן הייתה טובה יותר מווילס היום בכל פרמטר. סרדר אזמון שם פגע בקורה ומסר במקום להבקיע בגול הראשון, אם אתם זוכרים, במחצית הראשונה, מה שהיה נבדל. אבל אין מה לעשות, האוהדים האלה של טים מלי זה פשוט משהו מטורף. ושוב אני אומר, מונדיאל במזרח התיכון, you can hate it or you can love it, אבל אין דבר כמו מה שהולך עכשיו באחמד אל-ענבי. תראו איזה מצב הגעתי.
אורי, בא לי לשאול אותך עוד שאלות כדי שנמשיך לדבר וימשיכו לשים עליך פריטים ומרצ'נדייז וצעיפים וכובעים, אבל אנחנו צריכים להמשיך. תודה רבה.
הנה.
אוקיי.
خدا como me resulta.
عهد بی‌مسخل اداری تو قلب من هست خودم سلفی دست نمیدم مستقلم زیر پرچم نمیدم
بله قربان زندگی نرماله یه سال کار کرد یه شب شام کفاره بله چشم قربان زندگی نرماله به جز اینم نمیگیم مبادا کی جرم باشه بله قربان زندگی نرماله یکی تو اینجا که کسافتتون رو از بالا میریزید دیدید چقدر فرق داره دیرین ازتون بیلیت نمیخواد دعوت منی تمتون پسر برو تو اتاق آقا رو نترسون ایشون کهنه و پاره ندیدن نه حتی از دور قربان نظاره کنید شما ستاره شدید با کرسوی نور همینا که اعدام میکنید شما با اشتباه رشد کردید به جای توبه نقد منتقدم بریدی تا اراده کنید قربان شیرین کنید کامتون رو تلخ کلامم اینجا مردم فقط زندن زندگی ندارن بچه های ما شبا سر رو گشنگی میذارن ببخشید وجدانای شما چجوری میخوابن
The situation of women in my country, it should be noted that according to credible statistics and reports, the Islamic Republic of Iran has achieved greatly in empowering women and girls, as well as in protecting and promoting their roles and rights in social and public life in the past 4 decades, particularly in the field of education, health, industry, economy, sports and politics, where equal opportunities for women have been provided in all areas of personal and public life.
صحبت از مسائل اجتماعی و مدنی میشه برای من فوتبال دیگه اولویت نیست. یه سری شرایط آدم میبینه یه سری مصاحبه‌ها رو از مسئولا میبینه که اصلا انگار به درد مردم، به زخم مردم نمک میپاشن. همه تحت فشارن، یه چیزایی میگن که بدتر کنن شره. برای من خب اون زندگی اجتماعی، جایگاهی که قرار گرفتم، باید ازش استفاده کنم که صحبتی که اون هواداره ما میان تو استادیوم با هزاران بدبختی بلیتو تهیه میکنن، ما رو تشویق کنن، ما باید زبون اونا باشیم. حادثه اون فاجعه تو آبادان اتفاق افتاد دیگه، ما نمیتونستیم امروز جشنی بگیریم. واقعا هم ته دلمون یه غم بزرگ بود برای مردم آبادان. واقعا موقعی که میبینم و فکر میکنم همیشه بغض گلومو میگیره، واقعا ناراحت میشم و کاری از دست آدم بر نمیاد. من نمیدونم اون مسئولین واقعا شرمنده نمیشن این موقعیت ها رو میبینن، این وضعیت رو میبینن. من میدونم الان تو اهواز خیلی درگیری ها هست، خیلی مشکلات هست، خیلی اعتراض کردن. فقط میخوام به اونایی بگم که سوء استفاده میکنن. میخوام بهشون بگم وطن فروش من نیستم، تجزیه طلب من نیستم، من یه جون دارم، هزاران بار فدای ایران میکنم.
فیدبکشون نمیترسی چون دفعه چندمت بود؟
چرا باید بترسم؟
شاید الله مثلا یه عقبات
چیز بدی نگفتم که بترسم، حرف حقه. عمرمون کوتاهه، ما باید سعادتمند زندگی کنیم. این حق مردم ایرانی که سعادتمند زندگی کنیم.
در جلسه
اون تلویزیونه؟
کردم بله.
تلویزیون خاموش کن.
چرا؟
من با تلویزیون حرف نمیزنم.